What if I told you that one of the greatest performance skills in the world is not intelligence, it is not talent, it is not discipline, it's not even productivity, it is emotional stability. Now, that might sound surprising because most people think about performance, they think about strategies, time management, leadership skills, communication techniques, business systems, goal setting, but very few people stop to consider the invisible factor that determines whether all those skills actually work under pressure: emotional stability. And here is where this matters. Most people don't fail because they lack knowledge. Most people fail because they lose access to their knowledge when pressure arrives. Think about that. You already know many of the things you should do. You do. You know you shouldn't send that angry text. You know you shouldn't make important decisions or frustrated. You know you shouldn't react impulsively during conflict. You know you shouldn't let one setback ruin an entire day. Yet people do it all the time. Why? Why do they do it? Because performance doesn't break down when life is easy. Performance breaks down when emotions take over. And before this video ends, I'm going to share something that completely changed how I view leadership, how I view success, relationships, and personal growth. It is the same reason some people remain calm in chaos while others collapse under pressure. And it has almost nothing to do with personality. It has almost nothing to do with personality. Let's talk about it. Growing up, many of us were taught a strong idea. We were taught that strong people don't get emotional. Strong leaders don't show vulnerability. Strong professionals remain unaffected. Strong people push through. They keep moving. They keep performing. They keep producing. But that is not strength. That is suppression. And suppression always sends a violator. The problem is that many high capacity individuals become incredibly skilled at appearing stable, while internally becoming fragmented. From the outside, they look composed. Inside, they are overwhelmed. From the outside, they appear confident. But inside, they are anxious. From the outside, they are leading teams, organizations, and families. Inside, they are exhausted. The reality is that emotional stability is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to remain coherent while experiencing emotion. There is a difference. One is suppression, the other is mastery. Think about Captain America. What made Steve Rogers such an effective leader wasn't that he lacked emotion. In fact, he felt deeply. He experienced loss, frustration, fear, disappointment. But he didn't allow those emotions to dictate his decisions. He acknowledged them without surrendering control to them. That is emotional stability. And that's a skill, not a personality trait. A skill, which means it can be developed. That skill can be developed. And here is something most people never considered. High performers are often at greater risk of emotional instability than average performers, not because they are weak, but because they are carrying more. They are carrying more responsibility, more expectations, more pressure, more decisions, more people depending on them, and eventually the weight accumulates. Eventually the weight accumulates. I once worked with a leader who seemed like he had everything together. He had a successful business, was respected by his peers, was financially secure, highly productive, but he constantly felt irritated. Small problems felt enormous. Minor setbacks ruined entire days. Conversations triggered disproportionate reactions. And his question was simple. Why am I becoming less effective, though I'm working harder? Why? The answer wasn't productivity. The answer wasn't strategy either. The answer was emotional overload. His internal system had become saturated. Think of your emotional capacity like a smartphone battery. Every decision uses energy. Every conflict uses energy. Every uncertainty uses energy. Every unresolved frustration uses energy. If you never recharge or recalibrate, eventually your system starts malfunctioning. Not because you are incapable, no, but because you are depleted. Because you are depleted. Many people mistake emotional exhaustion for weakness. It is actually a capacity issue. And capacity directly affects performance. Capacity directly affects performance. Here is what most people don't realize. Emotional instability does not affect feelings. It affects performance, it affects judgment, it affects relationships, it affects execution, it affects leadership. When your emotional system becomes unstable, your decision making deteriorates. You become reactive instead of responsive. You become defensive instead of curious. You become impulsive instead of strategic. Emotionally unstable people often make decisions designed to reduce comfort rather than create long-term success. That is a dangerous distinction because immediate relief and long-term wisdom are rarely the same thing. Think about Tony Stark in the aftermath of the Battle of New York. His anxiety wasn't just affecting his emotions, it was affecting his decisions, his relationships, his leadership, his ability to think clearly. The emotional system influences the cognitive system. And that is true for all of us. That is true for all of us. When emotions become chaotic, clarity becomes difficult. That is why emotional stability is not a soft skill. It is a performance skill, a leadership skill, a decision-making skill, and it is a strategic advantage. It's a strategic advantage. Now let's challenge another misconception. People assume that emotionally stable individuals are always calm, always composed, always peaceful. That is not true. Emotionally stable people still experience frustration. They still experience fear, stress, disappointment, anger. The difference is what happens next. They recover faster. goal isn't emotional perfection. The goal is emotional recovery. Everyone gets knocked off balance. Everyone. The question is, how quick can you recalibrate? Imagine a pilot flying through turbulence. The aircraft is constantly adjusting. Tiny corrections, tiny recalibrations, tiny responses. The plane stays on course because turbulence. The plane stays on course not because the turbulence disappears, but because adjustments happen continuously. The same principle applies internally. Emotionally stable people don't avoid disruption. They recover from disruption efficiently. They notice when they are drifting and they realign quickly. That is an honorable skill. That brings me to one of the most important concepts that I teach through the internal coherence recalibration model. Most people focus on managing behavior, but behavior is the symptom. Behavior is the symptom. Coherence is the source. When your values, your beliefs, your priorities, emotions, and decisions are aligned, stability increases naturally. It increases naturally. Why? Because internal conflict decreases. Think about how much energy people spend fighting themselves. One part wants rest, another part demands productivity. One part values family, another part gives priority to work. One part wants peace, another part seeks approval. This internal conflict creates friction, and friction drains capacity. It drains capacity. And what is the result? The result is stress, confusion, overwhelm, decision fatigue. The solution isn't more discipline, it is greater coherence. Because coherence reduces internal resistance. And reduced resistance improves performance. Reduced resistance improves performance. So how do you actually develop emotional stability? How do you develop this? Let me give you 3 practical approaches. Number 1, stop managing emotions and start understanding them. Most people treat emotions like enemies, something to suppress, something to fix, something to eliminate. But emotions are information. They are signals. Every emotion is trying to tell you something. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? Ask, what is this feeling trying to reveal? That question changes everything. Number 2, create space between response. One of the greatest indicators of emotional stability is the space between stimulus and response. When something happens, don't rush to react. Pause, observe, reflect, then respond. That small gap often determines whether you create progress or regret. It determines whether you create progress or regret. The highest performing leaders I know are rarely the fastest reactors. They are often the most deliberate responders. Number 3, conduct daily internal alignment checks. Most people check their calendars every day. Few people check themselves. Take 5 minutes and ask, what am I feeling? What is creating friction? What am I avoiding? What needs attention? These questions help identify misalignment before it becomes overwhelm. Small recalibrations prevent major breakdowns. Small ones. Let's bring this together. The world teaches us to improve performance by adding more knowledge, adding more systems, more strategies, more productivity. But sustainable performance often comes from something much simpler. It comes from greater emotional stability. Because when emotional stability increases, decision quality improves. Relationships strengthen. Leadership becomes more effective. Stress becomes more manageable. And clarity becomes easier to access. The strongest people are not the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who remain coherent while struggling. They are the ones who can experience pressure without becoming pressure. They are the ones who can experience chaos without becoming chaos. That is why emotional stability is not a luxury. It is not a personality trait. It is not optional either. It is a performance skill. It is a performance skill. In many ways, it is the performance skill, because when pressure rises, your success will not depend on what you know. It will depend on whether you can remain aligned enough to access what you know. And that ability changes everything. That ability changes everything. If this video resonated with you, comment the word stability below. I would love to know what's one situation where emotional stability would improve your performance right now. And if you are committed to developing internal coherence, so success doesn't come at the expense of your peace, subscribe and join me for the next video. Because the goal isn't just achieving more, it is becoming someone who can sustain it.